a little bit different. You're right.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, honestly, okay, now I can see people. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Should I just take things away, Sarah?
You're the man. You go.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, welcome, folks. Welcome to our SC-200 office hours. And maybe what I can do is just take over the screen and first start off by introducing myself. There we go, there we go. And maybe I can get a quick thumbs up from folks. Can you see my screen? Does everything look okay? Yeah, feel free to use the thumbs up feature. Amazing, amazing. Thank you, thank you. So my name is Kyle Czernuszka, and I am a Microsoft technical trainer at Microsoft. Prior to this role, I was a cloud solution architect also at Microsoft. I focused on a lot of different things, but I primarily focused on like working with Azure, helping companies adopt Azure, and what that looked like. But now I'm a trainer and I focus on working with customers to upskill across these respective technologies. Right, so primarily infrastructure related technologies and security related technologies. Okay, I've also thrown some other things on the slide as well, some of my interests and some of my contact information. So feel free to connect. But regardless, that's not really why you're here today. I think you're here today to have your questions answered and for me to talk a little bit more about the SC-200 Microsoft certification exam. I think maybe before we do any of that, maybe I can just get a like a pulse check from all of you. Like where are you coming from? What are your roles? And maybe feel free to use the chat just so I have an idea of who I'm speaking to. But yeah, so where are you coming from? What are your roles? Gives me a good idea of all of you on the call. Yeah, and Omar says greetings from Nicaragua. Great to see you. Thanks for attending. Sarah's from Ontario, Canada, an MCTPM. Haha, I think you all know me. Yep, definitely know Sarah. And Sarah lives in the same general location that I live in. So you got two Canadians on the call, which is the best, of course. Which is the best. Can I self-proclaim Canadians are the best? Maybe not. Maybe not. Okay, perfect. We've got an Azure trainer from Ottawa, not too far off from where I am. I can't see your specific name, but that's okay. But Azure trainer from Ottawa, project manager from India. Okay, so we got some variety. Okay, so that's great. And I can see there's other people on the call as well, but that's totally fine. Yeah, you're in the middle of Kyle and I. I actually live in a place called Kingston, Ontario, Canada. So I sort of lied. I don't live in Toronto specifically. But anyways, this is kind of what I had in mind in terms of an office hours. Like for example, I would like to spend a little bit of time walking through the SC-200 exam and sharing, some additional resources, some of my own personal resources. I also had like some other topics in mind. So for example, an introduction to SecOps, right, Defender for XDR, Sentinel, and some other given topics. But I think what we should start off by doing is just sort of pause and see if anyone on the call had any questions with regards to, the SC-200 certification or the exam. Maybe we can start there. Were there any general questions? I like to think of office hours as, time for all of you to come to the table with your comments, questions. So maybe we can start there. Prerequisites. Okay, yeah, that's a great question. We can start there. And maybe to answer that question, I can just open up this first link that I've linked, and this actually takes us to the exam homepage. So maybe we can start here, and hopefully this will answer the question. So this is the Microsoft Certified Security Operations Analyst Associate. Very long name. Basically the SC-200 certification. When we come to this page, it does share all this great information with regards to what you should expect to see on the exam and what a candidate would look like in terms of being successful in terms of passing the exam. Right. So for example, I'm not going to read all of this, but for example, as a candidate for this certification, right? You should have knowledge across, these areas, right? Specifically security operations and, performing triages, responding to incidents, and, et cetera, et cetera. Oops, sorry. Okay, so that's what the page starts off by walking us through. And by further progress, it then shares some preparation material that we can consume that's self-paced. Okay, so what you see here, this course will redirect us to the Microsoft Learn platform. Actually, we are within the Microsoft Learn platform, but this will direct us to like actual self-paced content that we can choose to consume to better understand topics covered on the exam. Okay, so this is all for free, right? Microsoft Learn is a free platform for those that haven't heard of it. There's some great information here, a lot of information, but some great information nonetheless. If I further scroll down, we can see some other resources. I do want to spend a little bit of time walking through this, but just to answer your question, I thought I would, see the answer to your question on this page. But to answer your question, there is no prerequisite per se in terms of being able to take the exam. Like you could pay for and then try to take the exam, let's say, tomorrow or, this week, if available, of course. But there's no like prerequisite. Like you don't have to have passed a different exam or nothing like that. You can just take and, attempt to pass the exam at your leisure. So that answers the question, but I do want to spend a little bit more time on this page. Now, if I scroll down to the bottom of this page, there is one resource here truly worth highlighting, and that's this resource down here, which is a link to the SC-200 study guide. Okay, so if I click on this, I'm going to open up on another page. If I click on this, right, this will take us to this page, of course. If I scroll down, right, this page basically complements what I had just mentioned. And that's the fact that, the exam, right, the exam is broken down into these different like core objectives, right? So for example, manage a SecOps environment, right? That's about a fourth of the exam. Configure protections and detections, right? About a fourth of the exam. Manage incident response, manage security threats, right? These are the 4 core objectives that define this exam. But what's really nice about this page, and if you've seen this, then you already know this, but for those that haven't seen this, I do think that this is one of the, if not the best resource that we all have access to. If I scroll down on this page, what Microsoft has then done is they take each of those core areas, right? So for example, manage a security operations environment, right? That was that first core objective. They break it down into these different subheadings, right? Subheading 1, subheading 2, and 3. And then look, they further break this down into the specific tasks or specific technologies that we need to be aware of in terms of being successful, in terms of passing the exam. Right. So, on the call, for those that are looking to pass and take the exam, you can kind of treat this page as like a checklist. Do I know what this is referring to? Have I configured this feature? Have I deployed this feature? Do I even know what's going on here? And if the answer is yes, then you can check it off. And if the answer is no, then hey, maybe I need to spend a little bit more time looking into this respective item. Okay, so in terms of like prerequisites, as the question was asked, there's no like formal prerequisites, but we should have a grasp of concepts listed on this page if we're looking to take and pass the exam. Are there any questions about this? Any comments? Hopefully that kind of helps a little bit. I can see somebody is typing. I have a question for all of you. Okay, there is a question in the chat. Is this an associate level exam? So if I come back here, I believe it is. I believe it is. Typically, these pages will tell us this. So yes, it is an associate level exam. So yeah, thank you, Sarah. It is, yes. So I have a question for all of you. Who on the call is looking to take and pass this exam? Maybe pop like a yes or no in the chat. Okay, got one yes. Perfect, perfect. Anybody else? Sarah, yes, perfect. Got a couple of thumbs ups. Lance, thumbs up. Okay, so a couple of people are saying yes. Okay, so then I'm just gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep talking. Honestly, at any point in time, just tell me to stop talking and raise your hand or pop a question in the chat. I'm gonna bring up a couple resources that I've taken advantage of that have encouraged me to pass the exam if my English is right on. Anyway, so coming back here, so again, the number one best resource is this study guide. I want to make that very, very clear. This is free. This is by far, in my opinion, the best resource that we have because Microsoft is literally telling us what is on the exam. Okay, so that's resource number one. Now, resource number two is this one. I'm just going to grab it. And I'm going to ask Sarah just to pop this into the chat. I don't seem to have access to the chat. So Sarah, I'm just going to throw this to you over a direct message. So this second resource will take us to this page, And so these are resources that I have defined, that I have used myself when I was preparing for the exam. And these are actually resources that I come back to frequently when it comes to consuming these respective topics. Okay, so for example, I called it like, the SC-200, like prep guide, but it really is a great guide when learning any of these Microsoft SecOps technologies. So for example, I start off with saying, okay, so here are some core learning resources. Okay, so the first core learning resource is a link to Microsoft Learn. Okay, so if I open this up, this will take us back to basically the page that I had reviewed at the beginning of today's conversation. It's this collection of like Microsoft Learn modules that directly pertain to topics covered on the exam. Okay, so it's like, again, the Microsoft SecOps Analyst collection of Microsoft Learn modules. If I scroll down, we can see all these different learning paths that directly correlate with subjects found on this study guide. Okay, so that's the first link, right? First link, nothing really new to some of us, perhaps. I've also shared a link to these lab instructions. And so if I open up this page, this will take us to this public GitHub repository that pertain to all of these different labs that help us better grasp these different topics. And that leads me to say, as you learn these different technologies, especially technologies through SC-200, I do encourage you to not only understand the concepts, but to also, gain that hands-on exposure, right? I think it's paramount, at least for someone like myself. I'm more of a hands-on kinesthetic learner. I truly need to see things being deployed. I need to, fail at deploying something and then make some corrections to, fix the deployment. I truly think that that is where learning takes place, right? Maybe not for everybody, but, for someone like myself. So in addition to consuming like the core Microsoft Learn modules, I also encourage that you get your hands on some sort of sandbox environment and then deploy these technologies as instructed through this public GitHub repository. Okay, so these instructions listed here, like for example, for learning path number 1 for this first lab, right? These exercises are quite detailed. It says click here, go there, do this, do that. So they're very detailed. And then in the chat, do I need a Sentinel subscription for labs? Yeah, so great question. So there are different ways to gain access to like some sort of sandbox environment. Luckily, there are free ways to get your hands on something like that. But to answer your question, yeah, you do need to gain access to what's called an Azure subscription. And again, luckily, Microsoft does give us access to an Azure subscription for free. I can probably find a link to that in just a second, but yes, you do need access to an actual subscription. I can talk more about that in just a second, but there are some resources that pertain to the exam that must be tied to an Azure subscription. Okay, so yes, great question, and thank you, Sarah. Sarah is on the ball. She shared a link to to how we can obtain that free Azure subscription. Okay, so that's the first section listed here. The next section gets into the official Microsoft documentation pages. And what I've done here is I've shared links to the technologies covered on the exam and their respective technical documentation pages. Okay, so for example, a core portion of the exam is defined by this technology called Microsoft Defender for Extended Detection and Response. And so if I click on this link here, this will take us to the, the official documentation page for Defender for XDR. Okay, so and like in terms of like, learning and consuming these different topics, yes, I encourage you to use Microsoft Learn, right? Those learning paths that we had just discussed. But I also encourage you to use the documentation pages to further understand given topics. Right, now, as you can tell, and for those that are new to, the documentation pages, every generally available Microsoft technology has some sort of documentation page that further describes that respective topic, right? So for, Defender for XDR, right, this is what this page looks like. And for those that are new to the documentation pages, some of them can be very lengthy and possibly very overwhelming. So I'm not encouraging you to like consume every single page right through these docs pages. I encourage you to like as you learn about these different topics to refer back to the documentation pages if you're unsure about a specific topic. Right. So for example, like let's say you want to deploy Defender for XDR. Then there's possibly a deployment guide listed here through the documentation pages, right? So not exactly sure what this is going to say, but it gives some guidance around what that looks like. Okay, what that looks like. Or if I'm looking to dive deeper into specific features of Defender for XDR, right? So for example, like the Microsoft Secure Score, well, I can navigate here to this documentation page to to get one step deeper with regards to this specific feature. Okay, so what I've done here is I've shared technical documentation for each of the core technologies covered through the SC-200 exam. Okay, so from Defender for XDR to the other Defender technologies, to Microsoft Sentinel, Microsoft Purview, right? Microsoft Entra ID, and then followed by Copilot for security. Okay, these are the core technologies covered through the SC-200 exam. Okay, before I continue, I've been talking for quite a bit, but are there any questions, any comments? Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Just going to continuing on. And what I've also shared through this page are links to like best practices, right? And again, like all of these links you see here are links that I have used in the past, but also or links that I continue to use to, again, to consume these different topics, right? So for example, the MCRA, a great resource. It's a collection of all of these different best practices and basically Microsoft's take on the cybersecurity landscape. And I'll actually open this in just a second because I do think it's a valuable resource, but that's, I've included that as a resource. I've included links to the Microsoft CAF and the Microsoft WAF, right? Also like general collections of, best practices and how you can go about, optimally adopting Azure or these different cloud technologies. The Azure Architect Center, the Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, right? Microsoft's definition of zero trust and the zero trust principles, and a link to again Microsoft's documentation as it pertains to like security operations. Okay, so again, just a collection of all of these different best practices. Now these may not be exam specific. Okay, these may not be exam specific, but again, these do allow us to better understand like Microsoft's take on like technologies covered or concepts covered through the exam. okay, through the exam. Okay, then the last section here, so there's only one page, but the last section here just link us to other resources that I think are beneficial, right? So for example, like the official Microsoft security page, there's also great learning resources that can be found through this page. The Microsoft Security Response Center, Microsoft's digital defense reports. I do recommend that you take a look at this page. So for example, if I navigate to this page, this is a yearly report that Microsoft releases with regards to things that they've seen over the past year or few years, right? Again, that pertain to like cybersecurity, right? So for example, I believe there's a 2024 edition. If I go to intelligence report, yeah, there we go. If I go to Microsoft Digital Defense Report, I think there's a latest edition for 2024 that was recently released a few weeks back. Yeah, there we go. So the 2024 edition, right? So again, if I take a look at this, it says, hey, the 2024 edition examines the evolving cyber threats from nation-state threat groups and cyber criminal actors, providing new insights and guidance to enhance your knowledge with regards to these different areas. Okay, so I highly recommend that you take a look at this report. It's released every year. It's quite interesting. Again, not exam specific, but it's exam related or tangential. Okay, and there's other links here as well. I'm not going to walk through each and every one of these different links, but other resources that complement the SC-200 exam. Okay, so that's a bit of an overview of that. Any questions? Any comments? I can see a couple people have joined, so welcome to our SC-200 office hours. Just walking through some resources and walking through setting some exam expectations. Okay, so let me minimize this. So that's that. Okay, so that's the SC-200 exam. What we could do now, we still have about 30 minutes or so. If there are no questions, okay, there's a question. Here we go. There's a question. So in the chat, is Copilot element recently added? So yes, I believe so. So if I go back here to the study guide. So again, the study guide does tell us what's on the exam, but what it also does is it has a bit of a change log to help us understand, up and coming changes or recent changes, right? So for example, I'm just going to search the page just to be a little bit quicker. So if I just search for Copilot, so as of October 21st, 2024, which was again a couple months ago, Copilot for Security was added to the exam. Okay, but not Copilot in general, but the flavor of Copilot called Copilot for Security will be on the exam. Okay, if I further search this page, there is a section that does explain what we need to specifically understand as it relates to Copilot for Security. Okay, so yes, it'll be on the exam, and this is like one of the new additions to the exam. So when I took this exam about a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago, it wasn't on the exam. Yeah, and thanks, Sarah. Sarah shared a screenshot of this image in the chat. So yeah, good stuff. Okay. So what we could do, and let me know what you think. I'm just kind of spitballing here. And Sarah says, yeah, when I failed this 2 years ago, it wasn't on the exam. Yeah, fair enough. What I think what we could do is I could talk through some of these different topics. Like for example, an introduction to SecOps, or maybe an introduction to Defender for XDR, Sentinel, or the workspace, or KQL, or Copilot for Security. Do any of these topics specifically interest anyone on the call? If not, I can just sort of spitball and work through maybe the first one, and then that will sort of dovetail into other topics. All topics, fair enough, okay. And these topics I find that people are truly interested in, so that's why I'd included them. So let's do this. And again, pause me if you have any questions. But let's just start off with an introduction to like the core, or sorry, to the exam, like the certification exam, and we can kind of go from there. So like what I've done here is I've introduced this whiteboard called Encodo. I love using the whiteboard. I love to present different topics using the whiteboard. I do find it's an effective tool. But when I explain these different topics, I sort of start very high level and dive a little bit deeper into the technologies. I find that, it's best to understand the why, or like the problem we're trying to solve, before introducing the technology, right? The technology is like a solution to the problem, but what's the problem, right? What's the problem? So for example, what I've done beforehand is I've just listed out a couple like core technical domains. And so, what I've sort of implied here is the fact that at a very high level, these are the core components that define an organization's digital estate. Right? So from identity to endpoints, networking, infrastructure, applications, and data, these are sort of like the core components. And we could talk about nuances, but at a high level, this could define a given company's digital estate. Now, from the perspective of like a security person, like a SOC analyst or otherwise, but from this perspective, our responsibility, right, or our core responsibility, is with the intention of reducing risk, right? Reducing security-related risk, right? As it pertains to all of these different technical domains. Right, reducing risk means a lot of things. It's reducing the probability that something bad could happen. It's reducing the potential damage when something bad does happen. Right. So, for example, right, reducing any financial loss, reducing any loss to sensitive data, reducing any disruption to our business, reducing any impact to the company's brand. Right. But all in all, as a security professional, our core responsibility is sort of centered around this idea of reducing risk. Okay, so that's the first thing to kind of keep in mind. And if I scooch over here to the side, I've sort of pre-drawn a couple things. So if that's the intention, how, right? How do we approach securing those technical domains? How do we approach securing the identity domain, the infrastructure domain? Like what does that look like? And so first things first, like what is the goal then? What is the overall goal? And yes, it's reducing risk, but if I could be a little bit more specific here, in my opinion, it really does tie back to something called the CIA. Or does anyone know what this stands for, the CIA? So it stands for a confidential. Yeah, thank you, Omar. It stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And it's not, again, this is not Microsoft specific, of course. This is just this industry-wide model or approach that's sort of our guiding light. We need to ensure that our systems or our data, that they're only accessible by authorized parties, that that there's what's it called? That they're only accessible by authorized parties. That those systems, that data, it's integral, it's accurate, it's not altered, and that it's highly available. Right? It's available when we actually need it. Okay, so that's our overall goal in the grand scheme of things. But my question still stands. How, right? How do we approach security to achieve this ultimate goal of CIA, to achieve the ultimate goal of reducing risk? And so that introduces a few different strategies. And again, there's different ways of looking at this. This is sort of my opinion, my approach, but there's different strategies here. So for example, the first strategy is something called defense in depth. And the second strategy is something called zero trust. Right, zero trust. So defense in depth and zero trust. So defense in depth basically means, we're approaching security through this multi-layered approach. And zero trust is a set of different principles, right? There's about 3 principles that's focused on protecting each and every asset. Now, if I could sort of if I could further simplify these two strategies, what I've done below here is I've sort of drawn out, like what a traditional organization would look like. Right. So if I think of a traditional organization, a company may be defined by identities, endpoints, right, infrastructure, applications, data, and sort of some sort of network. Right. So what we had described earlier on. And so if you think of like this traditional image, this traditional approach, traditionally, the network, right, the intranet truly acted as this security boundary, right? Truly acted as this measure to protect, right, all assets, right? To protect all endpoints, all identities, all infrastructure, applications, and data. Now, the problem with this traditional approach, as we can imagine, is that if this network became compromised, right, if this network became compromised, then all assets within this network would also be compromised, right? So if I could try to visualize this, if this network was compromised, then hey, our identities may be compromised, our endpoints, infrastructure, applications, and data. And so so what we need to think about, is we need to think about making sort of like a shift. And if I think about applying these two strategies of defense in depth and zero trust, basically what we need to think about doing is first things first, protecting each and every asset, right? So that would be like zero trust. So each and every asset, we're going to think about protecting. We're going to protect our identities, our infrastructure, our network, our infrastructure, our applications, and our data. Okay, so we're going to protect each and every asset. That's basically zero trust. We are reducing the attack surface and we are reducing the blast radius. And in addition to that, we're going to protect each and every asset through these distinct layers, right? Through these distinct layers, right? And that's basically defense in depth. And the idea here is that if one asset was compromised or if one layer was compromised, then technically your entire system would not be compromised. Right? There's no single point of failure. Okay, so again, to quickly summarize, right, the overall goal is to reduce risk, right, to achieve, CIA by applying these two strategies. Now that being said, I do still think that my question still stands, right? These are great strategies, but they're still they're very high level. So my question then becomes, how do we then apply or how do we execute these approaches to achieve our ultimate goal of CIA? I see the question in the chat. I'll get to that in just a second, but let me finish this last thought. How do we execute all of this to achieve CIA? Now, to introduce this topic, I do want to introduce something that I mentioned earlier on. If I come back here to my core resources, I did mention that I mentioned that there's something called the Microsoft Cybersecurity Reference Architecture. If I navigate to this page, right, these pages are great, right? Basically, the MCRA is this very large, very holistic set of documentation that includes all of these best practices around, the threat landscape, Microsoft's, security capabilities, right, DevSecOps, and much, much more. And so if I actually download the latest version of the MCRA, I've actually already downloaded it. So let me just open it up. It's actually just this very large PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so it's about like 96 slides. So it's very, very large. And every slide is quite detailed. So I do encourage you to take a look at this. But I just want to quickly quickly navigate to one slide, right? This slide 11. And what this slide does is it sort of answers the question that I've suggested, right? This slide suggests the fact that, when it comes to an end-to-end security approach, it's about zero trust and it's about yes, applying zero trust across these distinct layers. Okay, it's not as simple as how I have described it, but same idea, zero trust across all of these distinct layers. But in terms of the actual execution, in terms of actually, how do we make this possible? Microsoft introduces this equation of identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and govern. And so in terms of execution, we need to identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and govern. And coming back over here, I'm going to oversimplify that equation because that's very, very long, and that'll take me too long to actually spell out. Instead, I'm going to say execution boils down to this notion of prevention plus detection plus response. Okay, so prevent plus detect plus respond. And truly, this equation is the overarching idea of the SC-200 exam is how do we work with these different technologies to prevent, detect, and respond to threats, to misconfigurations, etc. Okay, so anyways, that's sort of a bit of an introduction to that. Are there any questions, any comments? I have a little bit more to add, but I just want to take a pause. And has this been useful so far? I've been just going off the cuff. So in the chat, yeah, thanks Sarah for sharing a link to the MCRA, and there's a GitHub link as well. Perfect. Yeah, and so earlier on, the question was asked, why does Microsoft talk a lot about zero trust? Is this a concept that Microsoft has introduced? So no, zero trust is more of like an industry-related topic. It's not Microsoft specific. Zero trust is, think of it as an approach in terms of how we should be thinking about security, right? So more specifically, if I could give you a better answer, if I take us to this link, Microsoft does have some guidance around zero trust, right? So again, it's not a product, it's not a something that you deploy. It's more of a strategy. Yeah, it's not a product, not a service, something that you would think about implementing when defining your architecture, your different systems, right? And zero trust boils down to these different principles, right? Verify explicitly, use the principle of least privilege, and assume breach. Okay, so in anything that we do, and this is why this comes up quite frequently within the world of Microsoft, within anything that we do, we should be thinking about applying these zero trust principles when doing anything. But when we deploy our identity solution, we need to think about applying zero trust. When I assign different roles or permissions to my identities, I need to think about applying zero trust. When I define my application, right, that could be defined by these different virtual machines, a virtual network, storage accounts, etc. I need to be thinking about applying zero trust to truly lock down that respective solution. Okay, so again, this is not Microsoft specific, but Microsoft does heavily lean on this strategy when it comes to implementing, any given solution. Okay. Yeah, good question. Good question. So if I come back here, I do want to add a little bit more. I'll keep pausing for questions. I do want to add a little bit more. What I want to focus on is this idea that this equation, this execution equation of prevention plus detection plus response. And I want to quickly double click into this because for those that have worked with for those that have taken any other Microsoft exam, right? For those that have taken maybe like the AZ-104 exam or the AZ-305 exam, or honestly many other exams as well, many of those exams focus on technologies that focus on prevention, right? So for example, for those that have taken the, the AZ-104 exam, you may have worked with, Azure Firewall or NSGs or, the Azure App Gateway or Azure Bastion. For those that have taken like the SC-300 exam, right, that focuses on Entra and things like conditional access. For those that have, worked with, data-related exams, right, you would have worked with technologies that focus on prevention. So Microsoft has a heavy focus on prevention, but from a security perspective, we're really only doing part of the job. It's not just about prevention, it's also about detection and response. And the analogy I like to use is that, if we think about our immune system, we could live a very, very healthy life to prevent an illness, right? We could eat all the right things, we could work out, we could get, 8 hours of sleep. But, what happens when we do get sick? And, you probably will get sick. We require some sort of immune system to then detect and respond to that virus. And that really is the premise of, the SC-200 exam, is that it's not just about preventing, it's also about, okay, something bad has happened. How do we quickly detect and then quickly respond effectively with a high degree of confidence to that respective threat? Okay, so that really is the premise of the course. And so to answer that premise, Microsoft uses these different technologies, right? Microsoft Defender and Sentinel primarily, to address this whole notion of detection and response. And so maybe what I can do is I can just, take a look at these different technologies and give you sort of a taste of the art of the possible. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So if I jump over here now, this is an introduction to what's called the Defender portal, right? So if I navigate to security.microsoft.com, I've already signed in, and just to keep things a little bit smoothly. This is the Microsoft Defender portal. There's a couple things going on here, of course. First things first. Okay, first things first. Well, you'll notice through this left-hand side, this left-hand sidebar, is there's links to all of these other different technologies. There's a link to Microsoft Sentinel. There's a link to Defender for Identity, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office, and Defender for Cloud Apps. So essentially what Microsoft has done is that they used to have many different portals for all of these respective technologies. There used to be a Defender for Endpoint portal, Defender for Office portal, Defender for Cloud Apps portal. And some of those portals still exist and some of them are still active. But Microsoft said, hey, why don't we change this? Because that's a little bit confusing. And instead, why don't we introduce this unified experience where, security operations folks or security professionals can navigate to a single-stop shop when it comes to managing all incidents and alerts across all of these respective technologies. And so that's where they introduced the Microsoft Defender portal. Okay, so for example, if I navigate down to the Microsoft Defender for Office section, for those that are familiar with this technology, we can find all of these similar tabs, all these similar sections that we used to work with through the alternative portal. And so everything's now unified through a single location. Okay, so we can manage all these different technologies through this single location. Now what happens here? Okay, what happens here is that all of these different technologies, right, all these different technologies will generate alerts, right, based on specific domain-related activity, right? So, for example, if there is a concern as it relates to a given application, then Defender for Cloud Apps may generate an alert. And so my point here is that all of these different technologies will generate high quality alerts, but all of these different alerts are very domain specific, right? These alerts will be identity related, these will be endpoint related, right? These will be, Microsoft 365 related, and so on and so forth. And that's great, right? That's great. However, it's not telling the entire story. right? So for example, what if an identity was compromised, and what if the adversary then compromised other assets across other domains? As the defender person, right, as the security professional, how do we fully understand that bigger picture, right? With all these domain-specific alerts, we may not be able to understand the all-up concern. And so what Microsoft has done through this portal is they've introduced a section called investigation and response. If I navigate down to the incidents section, what Microsoft has done is they've basically leveraged something called threat intelligence, or they basically leverage like AI and machine learning to correlate alerts from all of these respective technical domains, right? From all of these respective silos, they've correlated alerts to tell the bigger story, to tell, the bigger picture. And they've, formed what are known as incidents. So for example, if I go to incidents, we'll see some examples through my demo environment. But if we look at a given incident, I'll look at one at random, maybe this one. Okay, so this is a multi-stage incident involving some sort of privileged escalation on multiple endpoints reported by multiple sources. So this is a good example. If I click on the arrow of this incident, we'll notice that this single incident is defined by one or more alerts. Now, these alerts were generated, I can show you, were generated from other technologies, right? So for example, this one incident was created based on alerts generated by Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office, Defender for Identity, what else? And I think that's actually it. Yeah, Defender for Identity, I think that's actually it. But so what I'm implying here is that these incidents allow us to better understand context by, again, correlating alerts created from these different siloed solutions, right? Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, and Defender for Office in this specific case. And so if I click on this multi-stage incident, we can actually get a better understanding of what this actually looks like. Right? So for example, the first thing that we see is something known as the attack story. And this is this nice visual, this nice graphical representation of, what actually took place. Now more specifically, on the left-hand side, we see these different alerts, right, listed in chronological order, right, and it basically walks us through the fact that, okay, so something happened with, some sort of asset. Okay, so this user accessed a link that promoted something else to happen, which promoted something else to happen. And as you can tell, the graph does sort of walk us through this. It helps us understand visually what took place. But what it's doing here is it's correlating alerts from different domains, right? Different, products that defined these alerts to help us understand, the bigger picture, right? The attack story. All right, so because this given user, right, in this case, Jonathan Walcott, because, this person did something, suspicious or malicious, that then contributed to, these other problems surfacing. Okay, so all of this was created by Defender for XDR to give us a better idea in terms of what's going on. Now, if I further take a look at other aspects of this incident, we can see the actual alerts that were created. Okay, so 60 alerts created, which there's actually quite a few. The assets that were involved in the overall incident. Okay, so 3 devices, 7 users, 1 mailbox, and that's about it. And we can see some other things going on as well. Now, what's really amazing about Defender for XDR is that, this is the first piece of the puzzle. This is about like detection. What's nice about Defender for XDR is it also focuses on, responding. And so if I go to investigations can either be manually created or automatically created to address concerns surfaced through a given incident. Okay, so 5 investigations were created, again, either automatically or manually by some SecOps person to address concerns surfaced through this incident. Okay, so for example, these were the investigations that took place. If I click on one, for example, if I click on this one maybe, we can see now the automated actions or manual actions that defender took to resolve the respective concern. Okay, so for example, right, this concern ties back to, someone clicking a possibly, malicious, suspicious link. It shows us the alerts that are related to this respective investigation. It shows us, the evidence collected. Okay, the evidence, sorry, the entities related, and then based on those entities related, what evidence was then collected that ties back to some sort of suspicious entity. And again, what Defender does is it tries to remediate the given concern. Right, so it first creates a verdict. Okay, so this is deemed as malicious or suspicious, or there's no concern whatsoever, and then it takes some sort of actual action. Okay, so for example, if it's a suspicious URL, maybe it will quarantine the address, maybe it will block the address. There's a multitude of different actions that could possibly be taken. But again, this is either automated or it could be more manual. Okay, but the point here is that we can more effectively respond to these concerns through Defender for XDR. Okay, and this first page just shows us a nice graph of what this actually looks like. Right, the alerts are coming in. Right, different entities are being analyzed. Right, different entities are being analyzed. Based on those entities, 3 entities were actually found to be suspicious. So let's draw a verdict. Right. Based on the verdict, we'll take some sort of remediation response. So it's actually just like an investigation you would see through, like, for those that have watched like NCIS, for example, similar idea. They're collecting evidence, they're trying to find suspicious entities, and then they're going to draw some verdict to then respond to those suspicious entities. Okay, so this is like an overall example of the effectiveness of like Defender, but more specifically Defender for XDR, and how it helps us not only detect, but then respond to these different threats. And this is a core portion of the exam. So understanding these different components is paramount. But this is sort of like the art of the possible of what Defender can bring to the table. Yeah, Lance is dropping. No worries. Take care. Thank you for joining. Okay, so that was sort of an overall introduction. Are there any questions with regards to these different topics, with regards to the exam? Was this useful to folks? So in the chat, someone's asking, is there Defender for SQL? So good, really good question. So as I've sort of implied, there's different flavors of Defender. There's Defender for Identity, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office, Defender for Cloud Apps. There's also something called Defender for Cloud. Now, specifically for Defender for Cloud, it's actually not accessible through this page. Okay, it's not accessible through this page. However, before I show you where you can go to access Defender for Cloud, if I come back here to incidents, technically, Defender for Cloud does contribute to creating different incidents, right? So if I go to, service sources, for example, if I pivot on service sources, these are all the different sources that will contribute to creating incidents. And one of those sources is Microsoft Defender for Cloud, right? Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which is defined by, and here we go, where it's defined by all of these other Defender solutions, including Defender for SQL, Defender for Azure SQL. Okay, so it's Defender for databases, but same idea. Now, we cannot manage this service here. We can manage this service by going to the Azure portal, right? So Azure portal, search for Defender, if I can spell correctly, and here we go, Defender for Cloud. I know it's a little bit confusing, but Microsoft really is trying to make this more simplified by having a single unified experience. The reason why we manage Defender for Cloud through the Azure portal is because it really is an Azure technology. So the Azure portal is where we go to manage Azure technologies. So that's basically why. But I do see why that could be a little bit confusing. For all other, Defender technologies, they can be managed here through the Defender portal. But yeah. Cool. Good stuff. Good stuff. So it is 10 a.m. Eastern time. This does conclude our SC-200 office hours. If this was useful, let us know, right? Let us know. Let Sarah and I guess let Sarah know. But yeah, thank you all for joining us. It was great to meet all of you through this little short session, and hopefully we see you in a future office hours session. Sarah, did you have anything else to add or anything else that I should cover before we drop off?